Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. You're joining me again, or maybe you're listening for the first time. Welcome. You are so welcome here. Open your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit, your body to learning and growing and evolving. That is the communal space we all share together if you're listening to this podcast. Come as you are. We are so excited. I am so excited you're here because I am on a quest to find more people that want to grow and evolve and are curious and thirsty for connection and a deeper understanding of yourself and others. So yay, you're in the right place. And my guest today was a very fascinating guest, and I'm so glad she was able to join us. She's a New York Times bestselling author. And we talk about the busy brain. You may immediately go, that is me. My brain is always busy. I've got a lot going on. This podcast episode is for you. Let's say you're not sure. You can take her quiz and find out, do you have a busy brain? I knew I had a busy brain because I have a lot going at once and I intentionally have to slow my mind down and always have room for growth in my busy brain. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Dr. Romie Mustaq. Dr. Romie is a board-certified physician, she's a neurologist, who brings together more than 2 decades of leadership in neurology, integrative medicine, and mindfulness. She is an award-winning speaker working with Fortune 500 companies, professional athletes, and global associations. Her brain shift programs improve mental well-being and help to build a culture of wellness. Dr. Romie serves as Chief Wellness Officer for Great Wolf Resorts. Maybe you don't have kids, but if you do have kids, have you taken your kids to Great Wolf Lodge? Been there many times. Her expertise is featured in the national media such as NPR, NBC, TED Talks, and Forbes. Her first book, The Busy Brain, was published by HarperCollins in January of 2024. So I was so excited to have her on. It's a huge deal to be a national New York Times bestselling author. But more importantly, she wants to help people heal their bodies and brains. And so it was a perfect fit for the Close the Chapter podcast. She gave a wealth of information. Obviously, there's going to be more in her book. And I really wanted to break down, how do we get into curing or starting better habits on healing the busy brain? And I think it's a journey is the net of it, but she definitely gives us some helpful feedback based on her research. So we're going to dive into, what did she find out in her research? What are some of the keys? What is her shift brain, the brain shift protocol, and the important takeaways from the conversation? So you may get a little triggered at times when we talk about things. She doesn't believe in diets, and we get into some other interesting topics. I won't tell you what it is yet. You've got to listen till the end. But if you get triggered by anything, that's an invitation, as always, to see what might be there. What might that have stirred up in you that needs to be nurtured, tended to, looked at? And I want to hold all the compassionate space for whatever that is to come forward and be set free. So that without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Romie. Enjoy. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am so thrilled you're here with me with a New York Times best-selling author, Dr. Romie. Congratulations.
Kristen, thank you. I have to start off with this. So my book, The Busy Brain Cure, was published in January of 2024 by HarperCollins. And I remember being in meetings with my editorial and sales team. And I was like, this is going to be a best-selling book. And they were like, no, just focus on the message, Dr. Romie. And you're a first-time author and it's okay if we just get a few sales. I'm like, you've never worked with the type A neurologist before, have you? And So a week in, we hit the USA Today bestseller list. And I remember when the HarperCollins team called to tell me the news. I didn't know, they called me before it had gotten published out. And I was silent. They were like, "Are you okay? Are you there?" And I just cried for 24 hours, tears of joy. And they told me what I'm telling you and why it's so important as women that we celebrate each other. That in even today's world of a traditionally published book, there's a 500-to-1 ratio that a male MD or PhD gets a book contract compared to a woman. Even more rare than that for a woman PhD or MD to hit the bestseller list. And we do that together as a collective sisterhood, Kristen. And we say these things for anyone that's ready to close the chapter of, "I don't want to talk about my credentials because it sounds like boasting." One, this is a part of confidence and how we get ahead in our careers. But two, when you and I talk about it, we normalize it for the next generation of our collective sisterhood.
Thank you. That's why I wanted to open you with New York Times bestselling authors. The words first came out of my mouth, Dr. Romie, because I'm like, that is a huge compliment and congratulations. So excited for you. Truly, you're making a difference in the world. And that's the reason you wrote the book.
Yeah, it was. You know this as a colleague in the mental health, brain health world, healthcare world. Everybody has this like outdated notion as entrepreneurs, if you're listening to this podcast, that really was from 2008 when the economy crashed and large numbers of people found themselves without jobs and had to be entrepreneurs. And back then, there was this formula: give a TED talk, write a book, build a course. It's now 2024 when you and I record this podcast, and we have AI. People have TikTok to go get information, or YouTube or Google. And you only write a book, I feel, if there is a visceral calling to make change. And this book has been researched since 2017. The concept of the busy brain cure, 17,000 people taking the busy brain test with a new medical theory that you and I are going to unpack of why you have to heal a busy brain to close the chapter in your life. And then it took a year to research the science and write it, and another year to write the stories in the book. So this was a book that was, I would say, 4.5 to 5 years in the making and writing before it got handed to the publisher to start the publishing process.
Let's float back to how it all started. Like, what even started this whole journey of you writing the book? And you had a pretty significant health scare that really started you closing the chapter on parts of your life. So walk us through your story.
Thank you for asking, Kristen. I'm pausing, and if people aren't watching the video, I'm just trying to hold my emotions. I think I've done so many of these podcast interviews, and there's like a 4 or 5 sentence way that I answer that. But I think authentically, if I had to tell you, I entered neurology at a time where less than 5% of the brain doctors in America were women. And there was this god awful feeling, Kristen, that from the outside, it looked like she had made it. Pinnacle of the career, like starch white lab coat, designer high heel shoes, the title professor, researcher, winning all these teaching and research awards. And I remember walking the hallways. My physical body was in pain, my brain was in pain, and my soul was in pain. And I felt so alone. And Kristen, back then, not a single person at work asked me if I was okay. Now, they noticed that I was struggling because the nurses would come and tell me that people were gossiping about me, trying to figure out what was going on. And that put me into a darker place of guilt and shame of, why is nobody else around me struggling? Like, why is this? This was before we had the terms mental health crisis in the workplace, burnout in the workplace. These terms did not exist in the medical vernacular. I didn't know what was happening to me. And what do? You keep pushing until I couldn't push anymore. And the chest pain that they initially misdiagnosed as acid reflux from stress, turns out it's a serious medical disorder, achalasia. I had precancerous lesions, and I ended up in life-saving surgery. And I learned firsthand that chronic stress will cause physical disease. Chronic stress can kill you. It almost killed me. And I should have known better. I'm a brain doctor. And yet I'm here because so many people are walking through that going, oh God, another podcast on stress and burnout. Kristen, who isn't burned out these days? But when you're in it, it is the loneliest place in the world. And maybe I'm here to say, if you're listening and giving us your time and your heart right now, you're not alone. Kristen and I are here for you.
I love that. It is such a lonely place to be because you feel like everybody else is it together, but I don't. I need to just keep going. Everybody else seems to be doing that. What's
Yes.
me? And then your body said, boom.
It's even lonelier now because this was back in 2008, 2009. Life-saving surgery happened in 2010. Facebook was new back then, but our lives weren't as consumed by social media as it is today in 2024. And so today it's even worse that compare and despair, and that you compare, and on social media, everybody's polished posts or even the quote unquote authentic I'm suffering posts. Those are just clickbait, tell you about a problem. So you click and buy something or like and post. But because people think that like, oh, I texted Romie, I texted Kristen, I sent a DM on Instagram with a funny reel, we're missing that social connection, which makes this lonely feeling even worse.
Oh, it's a huge, huge issue, especially for our teen population. I mean, we are seeing record, and you probably know this too, record numbers of anxiety, depression, and suicide.
It is. It is. Well, so my book, The Busy Brain Cure, I want to be clear, is written for adults age 18, probably even 25 and older. But yes, I have the honor of a lifetime member of the Girl Scouts, and I serve on the National Board of Director for the Girl Scouts. Are you a Girl Scout?
I was when I was little, but yeah, that's exciting. Okay,
So I'm
all my
on
Girl
the
Scouts out there.
Yes, for all of our Girl Scouts out there, 55 million women and girls around the world that are alumni or active members right now. And I'm on the National Board of Directors of Girl Scouts USA. And we commissioned a mental health study, to your point, about women and girls. And here was the shocking data. So the data was collected in partnership with NAMI. And they found that girls start feeling lonely at the age of 5.
5 years old. So everybody identify your own 5-year-old self, like float back to when you were 5.
I'm having this moment with you. Can I tell you what it was with me at 5? I'm the daughter of immigrants, and English is my third language. And when you're an immigrant's child, this polished, presentable look, so you don't bring shame on the family when you're going to school. I would have these big flouncy dresses that were like Easter dresses, but my mom used to put them on me to school almost every day. I had a pretty taffeta flouncy dress. And my one accessory or emotional support animal was my neon Fisher Price stethoscope, because my mantra from the time of birth was, we have one daughter and you will become a doctor. And my dad was a doctor and he had his stethoscope. So I had mine. And God forbid, Kristen, something happened to that stethoscope. I was unconsolable. It was like a piece of me had been taken away. So that is the 5-year-old Romie. I knew back then with conviction in my soul that I would be a doctor. And by the 3rd or 4th grade, I was starting to watch Connie Chung and Barbara Walters. And I was like, that's me, a voice talking out to the public. And by the 4th grade, I was like, I know I will write a book one day. And what do you know in 4th grade about that? It's just, I was an overachiever in my soul right out of the womb, girl. Let's be real.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, your spirit was like, I am made for this. This is the purpose of why I'm here. Let's define what you define as busy brain, because if we kind of hold this space for our inner, 5-year-old self as we're having this conversation, we develop it pretty young. I mean, the busy brain, what is it and how does it develop?
So busy brain, Kristen, has nothing to do with the 24-hour news cycle, how full your email inbox is, or what's on your calendar. It actually has nothing to do with it. It actually has to do for adults that when you're under chronic stress, there is a reason why you do not want to hear the words, oh, Kristen, just eat berries and breathe. And look at this other TikTok of a baby hugging a puppy. Like nobody wants to hear that anymore, because that's outdated brain science. When we have chronic stress, it leads to neuroinflammation in the brain, in a particular area of the brain called the airport traffic control tower. And 3 key symptoms develop. We researched this in over 17,000 people who took the busy brain test. And your listeners can take it for free. We'll put a link in the show notes. It gives you a score in less than 4 minutes.
I've taken it. So everybody take it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask, do you feel like sharing your score?
I haven't. Let me pull up my score. I'll have to, because I took it like a month ago.
While you're pulling up your score, I'm going to talk about what a busy brain is. The 3 key symptoms we found in high achieving adults were this: difficulty focusing or adult onset ADHD, anxiety, ruminating anxiety, thoughts are playing on a negative loop, and then insomnia. You have a marathon of warring conversations in your brain that are preventing you from falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night, making you think, oh, I'm going to be productive and knock out a few emails at 2:37 a.m. and do a couple loads of laundry before the kids get up. So that is what a busy brain is.
Okay, my score was 40.
Not bad, but abnormal. So the goal is to have a score below 30. If you have 30 below 30, it doesn't mean you don't have stress in your life. It means you're processing and able to perform through that. A score between 30 and 40, you're at borderline what we call brain drain. There's like an energy leak in your brain or body system somewhere. So the things that normally energize you, Kristen, like a cup of coffee, hot sex, jumping on a Peloton, will actually drain you. When you get a 40 or above, we know you not only have a busy brain, you're tending towards burnout with actual brain and physical symptoms. And above 60, you're in burnout. And here was the scary thing. 82% of people that took the test between 2020 and 2022 had a score above 30. And by the way, those numbers really haven't improved in the last year.
Does it depend on when you take the test? Like, let's say you had a day. No. So that will not.
Because these symptoms, yeah. If you're like, oh my God, I had the worst 2 days at work, or I'm in a fight with my partner, or my teenager is getting on my last nerve, I need to retake the busy brain. The test is actually looking at a snapshot of how you were feeling over the last 2 weeks, which is a pretty accurate description. When we talk about chronic stress, we are looking at stressors that are in all of our lives for the last few weeks, few months, few years.
That helps. So let's talk about the busy brain. And I'm a marriage and family therapist. So I look at development. That's my lane that I love to talk about, in systems. So cultural systems, family systems, we look at systems. My heart, love it. Could talk about it all day long.
Same. From a brain point of view.
Yes. Yeah. You've got the brain. And I'm like, yes. Okay. When we think of developing the busy brain, do we think it can start developing in utero based on surrounding? No. Okay. When does it start? That's a better question.
So again, I just want to repeat myself that my research was done on adults, 18 and older. I still think there's complex neurodevelopment happening in college age students, whether they're in college or not, exposure to drugs, alcohol, et cetera. So really our test population was really ages 25 and up.
But we didn't look at developmental traumas or anything like that.
Kristen, we didn't, because when we look at ADHD, anxiety, and insomnia in children and teenagers and even young adults, that is a completely different neuropathology and genetics. It's kind of asking to talk the difference between apples and high heel shoes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So what we do is get to the root cause of busy brain. And there are some genetics that we're going to unpack in the brain shift protocol that I do look at. But really, this has to do with the adult lifestyle of living under chronic stress. So anybody that is like, no, I don't want to close this chapter of my life because even though it's painful AF, it's comfortable. I'll stay in this toxic marriage. Maybe this awful toxic boss will drop dead of a heart attack and I'll get a new boss and everything will be fine at this awful job where I'm doing the job of 3 people and only getting paid for not even 1 salary. That is why we're here, is that chronic stress, busy brain model is preventing you from closing the chapter and having the hope and the excitement to close that book and start a new chapter.
Yes. Okay. So in practical terms, I would say I was so busy in college. Like I did everything similar to you. I will do all the things that my body was like, nope, we're not going to do this. How do people begin to wake up to say, what's the cost? If you continue doing what you're doing, how do people start waking up to decide they want to make a change?
So let's just talk to your adult listeners and say, does this sound like you? You're like, ooh, Romie and Kristen are so peppy on this podcast. Girl, don't even talk to me until I get a venti latte with oat milk. And if the barista puts regular milk in it, I will be bitter for the rest of the day. And you're telling us it's just that venti latte, but it was really several energy drinks. Or maybe you can't make it through your day as a working mom or caregiver to adults without Vyvanse or Adderall. And then you're still anxious and there's multiple browser windows open at your work desk and multiple browsers open in your brain, and something that takes 3 minutes, me sending Kristen a quick DM saying, yo, thank you for having me on your podcast, is taking 37 minutes because I'm distracted by everything else that seems like a code red emergency in my brain. And then you remember this podcast and you're like, I'm going to go home and stand on self-care and shut the door to the office and not work. And you can't take the edge off without 3 glasses of wine. And if you don't drink, it may be a sedative medication that the doctor gave you. You're going to go to sleep tonight because we talk about it in the brain shift protocol, and you put your head down on the pillow and there's 72 warring conversations happening in your brain. And the least important thought is the most toxic thought that is robbing you of sleep and sex at night. Something like, oh my God, I forgot to put the oil in my hair and it's frizzy because it's so humid and raining in Florida and I'm on camera for this interview. That is a busy brain. That's your wake-up call. Because the cost of this to women and men is it starts robbing your memory in your 20s and 30s. It'll start robbing your ability to focus and your productivity. You don't need to work harder at work. When you hear that phrase, you need to work smarter, not harder. This is it. You need to heal busy brain. Because when I brain shift and I went through this protocol and researched it to heal my busy brain and then researched the solution in 1,000 executives, I'll tell you, I get more done in one day than the average worker does in 2 weeks because the neuroinflammation is gone and you can focus and quickly shift what we call a quick shift from one task to another.
Wow. Okay. So what is brain shift? You had an acronym and I love it. Can you share that?
So not only did we want to research a busy brain, be like, girl, you've got a busy brain. Good luck with that. We actually wanted to come up with a cure. And the way you heal burnout in today's world to go to an integrative functional medicine doctor like myself is typically concierge medicine, costs thousands of dollars. And I didn't believe it needed to be gatekept. I knew we could research an individualized solution so that when we went into corporate America, they could find their root cause of their burnout and heal it, but do it at scale. So hundreds or thousands of people could do it at a time. So that is where the brain shift protocol was developed, looking at medical literature. And shift is the cure. And the acronym SHIFT stands for S, sleep, your circadian rhythm, H, hormones in both men and women, I, markers of inflammation, F, how you fuel yourself without going on a diet or cleanse, because we don't believe in that, and T is the role of technology. And that was the 5 root causes that I go over and the science in chapters 5 through 9 of the book and break it down for all the health and medical experts that are listening out there.
Okay. If you had to say this is the top research showed this is the most important one, what would you say it is? Is there one that really says we've really got to get?
I think here were the 2 things that probably will surprise or not surprise most listeners. I think the most important one to start, the 8-week protocol stacks all these in a particular order. They're micro habits that aren't going to get in the way of your busy day, but they stack upon each other. And you can't jump ahead to week 6 without doing week 1 first, right? And so you start with the 7-day sleep challenge. It's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, that we broke down in a challenge that you can do with a loved one at home, another adult, or your team at work. And the supplements we recommend to reset your circadian rhythm, to take down the neuroinflammation in the brain and start to reset that. But the second thing that I think shocked most men and women as I'm doing keynote lectures around the world on this is when we're under chronic stress in the airport traffic control tower and our brain is under inflammation, it will cause a hormonal havoc in a man and a woman's body. So this can mean men in their 20s and 30s and 40s are showing up anxious. We've not checked their thyroid and their free and total testosterone and DHE levels. And in a woman, they may have PCOS, infertility, thyroid disease, early menopause, and the only symptoms that are showing up are busy brain. I'm anxious and I can't focus. And so they're getting put on all these stimulants and not getting the root cause of the hormonal stuff diagnosed. And so that, I think, were the 2 most important areas: resetting your sleep and then paying attention to hormones. Let's unpack it. Yes.
Sleep is so essential. I have many clients that struggle with sleep.
Yeah.
They're like, I've tried it all. I've tried.
Yes, they have.
They're trazodone and they're on melatonin and they're taking Benadryl. They're like everything. Because I think that's one of the most important components to mental health. How do you help people with sleep?
Anyone listening to this, you've heard all the advice and seen it on social media. Here are your 3 tips. So no melatonin please, and no Benadryl. Melatonin for short term, if you're traveling and changing time zones for 3 to 7 days, it's okay. Anything longer than that, it's actually going to disrupt your internal hormonal systems for men and women, right? And it can disrupt estrogen for women. It can disrupt human growth hormone for men. Benadryl, alcohol, awful, because they may have a sedative effect, but they prevent us from going into stages 3 and 4 of deep sleep. And here's a fun fact that 10% of us, I'm one of those, has a gene where drugs like Benadryl actually make us more hyper than sedated. So that's another random fun fact. So you don't want that. So basically the supplements we researched that's in the medical literature is 2 things: magnesium glistening. Magnesium is key to all the chemical and hormonal functions in our brain to work, as well as, and it can be very calming to your, and then 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan. It is a natural remedy that is a precursor of serotonin, which is the feel-good hormone, and melatonin in your brain without disrupting your hormones. And so most people start feeling better within 7 to 10 days.
What about meditations? What about breathing exercises? How important is that to the busy brain?
I want to preface this by saying I am a certified in mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Meditation was my path that I found when I was sick and helped heal. And my TED talks about that. The people we were researching say, Kristen, I can't meditate. Meditate makes me more anxious. It makes my ADHD worse. The thoughts are hijacking my brain that it is taking up my stress levels. So busy brain is like, we need to heal this so that you can be relaxed in a yoga or meditation class, right? So I think of this as the pre-aware stage. And so in chapter 13 or week 4 of the protocol, we actually cover how to take a brain pause when you can't meditate anymore. And we actually break down the science of sound healing in this and the power of sound healing to change your brain waves, to calm you down from that frazzled, anxious, hyperactive, high beta state into a theta state so you can focus and feel in control and calm of your day and be in that state of flow for creativity. I don't know if that's going to surprise you to hear that, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Because here you are, you're writing your book, you've researched it, you're marketing it. How do you manage it? Like somebody that's kind of not predisposed, but like you have this drive in you.
Yeah.
How do you kind of on the day-to-day manage the busy brain? I mean, you got a goal, you want things you want to do. So
listen, this ain't no podcast for people that are like, go with the flow. Everything should come easy. You have 6 goals. Really, you shouldn't have any. That's, no. I mean, I wrote this book for fellow high achieving entrepreneurs and professionals. And there's this idea of, are you stuck on the stress success cycle? It's a really outdated way of fake it till you make it. This, I'm going to stress out until I get this book published. And then it hits the bestseller list. And then I need to make a certain sales goal. And so you hit one goal and then you try to go to the next and you stress yourself out. Like I was raised that way, and that will cause the chronic stress and cause you to burn out. I say there's a way to break the stress success cycle, that we can succeed when you brain shift and you heal a busy brain, that now you're so focused and productive that you're able to actually do the productivity tools that you've been taught in school or at work. Think of a KPI. What's your quarterly sprint? What are your pause points? How are you going to measure it? And you just stay focused and you don't get distracted. For the entrepreneurs that are listening out there, I call it the entrepreneurial shiny project syndrome. You have a great idea. You should start a podcast, start a blog, do a YouTube channel, write a book, because Dr. Romie's talking about her book, do a second podcast, try to get on Kristen's podcast, whatever it is. And everything feels like an emergency in your brain, and then nothing gets done. Rather than thinking of the overall KPI and what are the marketing goals and what are the sales goals to reach it, right? And that's what happens when you brain shift and do that. So now to answer a direct question, how do I do it? I practice brain shift while I'm on the road. I travel with my supplements. I am pretty strict to the best of my ability. I'm not perfect, but 60 to 90 minutes before bedtime, all digital devices are turned down and take my supplements. I do my sound healing meditation. I do my nighttime rituals. And then I follow weeks 5 and 6 of the protocol for nutrition, which you and I can unpack. And that's how I do it. And I'm human. I will tell you the 2 weeks leading up to my book launch and the first week, I was struggling, but I remember being on air on national television going, I have a busy brain during this book launch. But that's okay from time to time when there's a really big work or personal deadline. But you can't be in that sprint every day of the year. That's not healthy.
Yeah, that will send your body in that flight, freeze, fawn reaction. Okay, tell me about your nutrition. So people are like, you know what? I struggle with that. Then they go, because we have people that have all or nothing thinking with it.
Which is so unhealthy. Like, let me tell you, Kristen, I speak professionally for a living as a keynote speaker. The one time that I got a standing ovation in the middle of the talk was the American Counseling Association, my keynote there, when I told them we need to end diets and that diets are not a part of our book or calorie limiting cleanses. There are two reasons, and you alluded to one earlier. When we're on a strict nutrition protocol, I don't care what it is, paleo, keto, you're vegan, intermittent fasting, anti-inflammatory, the strict rules around food start creating guilt, shame, and trauma in the brain around foods of what you can and cannot eat. The second reason is I'm a chief wellness officer, as you mentioned in my introduction, for over 12,000 employees. I speak to corporate teams on Busy Brain for a living and individuals. Think about your individual needs in your family, let alone in the workplace. I want to create a place where vegans, paleo, intermittent fasters, carb lovers, chocoholics, and the busy person who just grabbed whatever was in the fridge for lunch and pray to God it doesn't have mold on it, that they can sit at one table and feel welcome. That we stop this judgment on diets. It's unhealthy. And so we had to find a way. How could we calm busy brain without putting you on a diet? And we created two simple rules. Week 5 of the protocol, after you've gotten your sleep and focus back in, is if you're going to have a high glycemic carbohydrate, a croissant, a cookie, white rice, white potatoes, white bread, then do not have caffeine 1 hour before or after. That's it. Because either you want caffeine stimulating your brain or the sugar spike, but you put two of them together, and that actually fuels the chemical reaction that will make you feel like you have ADHD and anxiety in the brain with both of them together. So in our protocol, when 1,000 people went through this, we found that most people chose caffeine, high functioning people. And they were like, I'll give that up. But then we actually say, step 2, schedule 1 to 2 comfort food meals a week. Comfort food meals, to that point of social isolation, is preferably that you're in person with someone else and you're eating food that is helping to develop a core memory of joy. You may be on a vacation. It may be a child's birthday party, a religious holiday, all those foods. We need to stop shaming them.
And so talk to me about caffeine, because you're alluded to the dependency many of us all have on caffeine.
Yeah. So a little bit of caffeine in the morning is fine. Ideally, when you brain shift, you wake up energized so you can wait 60 to 90 minutes before you get out of bed for that caffeine hit, right? Initially, while you're going through the protocol, you may need it. Caffeine in the morning, no problem. Just don't put any sugar or sweetener in it that's going to spike your blood sugar or have any other carbohydrates like cereal, croissants, toast, whatever that will spike it. Caffeine alone is not bad. Caffeine at a dose to about, depending on the type of caffeine, 80 to 120 milligrams a day, especially in the morning, is actually beneficial for the brain and neuroprotective. It binds to the adenosine receptors in the brain so that you're not sedated. Here's a problem, though, is we also have insulin receptors in the brain. So if you have these foods that are spiking your blood sugar, they get stimulated to regulate blood sugar in the brain. And that, on top of the adenosine receptors bounded, will actually promote the neuroinflammation in the brain and the chemical pathways in the frontal lobe that cause that ADHD and that ruminating anxiety, the I can't focus and everything seems urgent and I'm not getting anything done. And we want to stop that. And so the irony is, to your point, when we're sitting at work and you're like, God, another Zoom meeting, or how am I going to get through finishing this report? We keep chugging caffeine and having high glycemic carbs, and it's actually making it harder to focus. So it's like this chicken and egg phenomenon. Stop it.
Let's talk about alcohol in the brain.
Ooh, we're going to lose friends on the podcast.
We are.
We're going to lose friends. I'm so sorry. We're going to lose friends.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because it's become, well, it always has been, but it's really become a way. If you have a busy brain, people think, I need this in the wine culture. Like everybody, and I'm not dissing glass of wine, but I'm just saying this is.
I actually am. I actually am.
Okay, good.
I am.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Talk about it because I really want to make this a point.
I just want to talk about this is the alcohol lobby in North America is one of the strongest. And so they are fueling the BS that's out there. Oh, a glass of wine, like in the Mediterranean diet, is okay. It actually is not okay. Any amount of alcohol is fueling inflammation in the brain. It's as if you were worried about a forest fire and you just threw gasoline on the fire in the forest instead of water. That happens with any amount of hard liquor, wine, or beer, any alcohol.
Let's just clarify. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's
it doesn't matter what kind of alcohol
wine that the doctor at some point said, oh, it's good to have one glass of red wine a night.
Any doctor that's looked at the medical literature, and we have this all quoted in the book, will see that on brain scans and looking at markers of inflammation in the brain and in the body, even any type of alcohol in the little of its bit will spike inflammation in the brain and the rest of the body and in your gut. What does that mean for a busy brain? Temporarily, it may have an anti-anxiety effect. So you're relaxed and you can, I hate the term mom juice, so that they normalize that women are drinking wine out of a sippy cup all day long. That's not normal. That's day drinking. And it will have a temporary sedating effect. But what happens? There's all these GABA receptors in the brain that the alcohol is bonding to, and then they multiply like little bunny rabbits. And then the alcohol metabolizes out of your brain and body. And now there's all these receptors and you're even more anxious and busy brain than you were before. And you're like, oh my God, let me have more alcohol. And that's why if you started to drink, I'm just going to use wine as an example, half a glass of wine, now you need one. Now you have two. That building tolerance is because your brain is desperate for more. I've been there. I'm not judging you. You read my story in the book of to survive, my favorite three food groups were dark chocolate, coffee, and red wine. And it had to go away. So pick your poison. If you're going to do alcohol, fine. We give you the supplements in the book to take, but then you're going to need to cut other things out. Kristen, I made a decision that I wasn't going to give up rice and potatoes. And for my brain health and my breast health and my hormonal health as a woman, I was going to give up alcohol. And I can't tolerate it anymore. And here's something my spiritual teacher said is when you close the chapter in a period of your life, in a spiritual level, you're spiritually ascending. And you see the more you spiritually ascend, the more poisonous alcohol becomes to your brain, body, and spirit. And it feels painful right now to hear it. If you're needing a wine or a beer or a cocktail at night, and you're telling us, listen, it's only one. In our protocol, we actually ask you to omit the alcohol. And really, when people bring it back, it comes back as a comfort food, Kristen. So you're going to a date night or a wedding and maybe one glass then.
This is such an important conversation. I mean, people are like, I just put a little spritz of water in there and I dilute it. I'm like, that doesn't do anything.
It doesn't matter what you're mixing in the hard liquor, wine, or beer. It is still having that negative impact. And you can spend thousands of dollars on working with a doctor like me, getting labs, fancy diets, being on a GLP-1 agonist medication injection to lose weight. But if you're having alcohol, you're putting gasoline on a forest fire in your brain and in your body and for your hormones. Stop that.
People really need to hear this. And I know this may be a rumble for you if you're listening and you're like, but it's not that bad. I'm not as.
But check your trigger. Then check your trigger.
That's right.
If you're like, delete this episode. If you're like yelling at Kristen and I now, hi, that's your trigger. And remember, I started this podcast by saying you're not alone. We're here with you. Maybe that was the one thing you needed to hear today.
I would say if that is your one takeaway, we are with you and we are cheering you on and we're supporting you. And we want you to feel better at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we know it's hard. The brain protocol, the brain shift protocol that you kind of come up with. When people say, well, that's going to be too hard. And they get that what I call the F-its, like, forget it. Use another word in there. Whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like,
no problem. No judgment. Then it means it's not your time right now. You resonated with any of those symptoms, take the busy brain test. It's on my social media. We'll put a link here on the podcast. If you score above a 30, it's your wake up call. Like, okay. And then if you're wondering, well, why can't I sleep? Or I'm an entrepreneur and or a business owner and I really want to scale. And I feel like I'm working all the hours I can and it's not going anywhere. Or if you want to lose that last 5 or 17 pounds that you're still holding on to from the pandemic, I mean, whenever the time is right, just come back to it. I have no judgment. And the first step is to know your brain score, which is that busy brain test score, and then replace the self-judgment with self-compassion. And we teach you that in chapter 10. Chapter 11, we walk you through, and it comes for free in your email inbox, the week 1 of the protocol when you take the busy brain test. We just start you off there. And some people, Kristen, only finish the first 2-3 weeks and they get the supplements and they're like, that's all I needed. I'm good. But most people feel so good, they continue going. The Brain Shift Protocol was designed with little micro habits that won't get in the way of your busy lifestyle, that stack upon each other week after week. And you read the story in chapters 10 through 18 of 8 executives who went through this journey. And they were like, Dr. Romie, please share what we learned and the transformations that we had so it'll inspire someone else to realize that they can close the chapter on what's no longer serving them. You hear, I have the voice of judgment, the efforts, which is the Indian aunties in the beginning of my book, when I have a busy brain. And when you brain shift, it transforms to one of hope and wisdom and joy.
Yeah, and that you can do it. Is there anything we didn't cover that is really relevant to this conversation that you want to make sure you're saying out loud?
Yes, Kristen, close off the loop. If you take the busy brain test and your score is above a 30 and you're like, oh God, I'm in this dark place and I feel stuck in this chapter of life. I just want you to know, my friends, your brain is not broken. Your mind is not a mess. And hope did not depart your soul. You are not alone. Take my hand and let's brain shift.
Awesome. Okay, where can they find you? Where can they buy the book? Where can they find you and learn all the things?
Dr. Romie, DRROMIE, my website, Instagram, LinkedIn. Get your brain score, the busy brain test. It's for free. It takes less than 4 minutes. And we will email you the protocol. The best-selling book, The Busy Brain Cure, is available worldwide in English and 8 other languages, anywhere where you buy books, Amazon, Kindle, Audible. You're not alone.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for you and the work you're doing, Dr. Romie, in the world. Just grateful for our 5-year-old selves as we had a moment there. So thank you so much for being here, and go get the book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KRISTEN, DBoice, BOICE.com. Thanks, and have a great day.